Hey guys, welcome to the third part of the lecture on Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. In the previous two lectures, we discussed Act 1 and 2 of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And in today's lecture, we'll be discussing Act 3. Now, Act 3 begins with a news, a revelation. And what is that news? In the previous act, we saw that someone killed Alan. And now somebody has to break the news that Alan is being killed. And now who does that in the movie? Let's take a look. So when Act 3 begins, a woman who seemingly looks terrified enters the scene. And she's hurrying down the streets. And now we know that she's moving towards Francis's house. There Francis is getting ready for work. He is also seemingly disturbed about the events that happened the previous day. And the woman appears terrified. She comes towards him and reveals the news that Alan is dead. He has been murdered. So she says, Mr. Francis, Alan is dead. He's been murdered. And Alan is shocked by this news. He's terrified. It seems like he would soon go through a series of panic attacks. And he is saddened by the news because Alan was his best friend, right? Now the two characters grieve on screen and Francis takes the old woman to Alan's apartment. He leads her to Alan's apartment, and you can see it in this particular scene. So they just moved to Ellen's apartment, and we know that this is Ellen's apartment because you have this chair which we saw in the beginning of the movie. When Alan was ruminating about the things that were happening around him, he was just reading and then looking out through the streets. We saw him here looking out through the streets. So this is clearly Alan's apartment, and Francis sees the dead body here, and he again thinks about the events that happened the previous day, especially the prophecy that was let out by the somnambulist Cesare. So Cesare had told Alan that he would die the same day, that he would not see the dawn. He would die before dawn. So that somnambulist prophecy comes into his mind and he thinks about it. Who might be the cause of Alan's death? Who might have murdered Alan? Because clearly it's a murder. And now in the next scene, we see him frantically running through the stairs. And once again, when you take a look at it, because it moves pretty fast, I had to pause it in between. So this happens quickly, right? So usually in silent movies, they were shot in a rather slow manner. And later on, they would use an instrument like a cinemascope, and they would run it in high frames, and then this would all happen quickly. But if you see this entire movie for that matter, if you take a look at the entire movie for that matter, each and every scene moves in a very slow pace. But in this particular scene, he ascends up the stairs in a frantic manner. വളരെ ഭ്രാന്തമായിട്ടൊരു മനസ്സോടു കൂടിയാണ് നമ്മുടെ Francis ആ stairs run ചെയ്യുന്നത്. And that shows that he is terrified and he needs to report it to a higher authority. So he is seemingly disturbed, and that is conveyed through this particular scene. And he is ascending, slowly climbing up the stairs. He's running up the stairs in a very quick and frantic manner. So that shows that within him, the psyche, it has changed, and it cannot cope up with the grief of the death of his friend. And he is running amok. He just wants to report it to the police officers, and he wants someone to investigate this crime scene. So he rushes up the police station. This happens in a very quick manner, and in those days it was very difficult to keep the pace of a movie, right? So all the other scenes would go on a snail's pace, but this happens too quickly. So ഈ ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ സീൻ ഇന്നത്തെ ഒരു ഫ്രെയിം റേറ്റ് വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് ഇത്ര സ്പീഡായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ കാണുന്നത്. ബട്ട് ഇൻ ദോസ് ഡേയ്സ് വെൻ ദേ ഫസ്റ്റ് എയർഡ് ദിസ് മൂവി, ദിസ് സീൻ മൈറ്റ് ഹാവ് ബീൻ lightning fast because of the way in which it was presented, right? And he quickly climbs up the stairs. And just take a look at the stairs for that matter. I have in my previous lectures told you about the stairs that leads up to the police station, right? So similar to the clerk's office in the opening scenes of this particular film, the stairs leading up to the police station was also constructed in such a way as to show power and authority. Now, if you remember, in the clerk's office, when our Caligari wanted to present Cesare, the somnambulist, for the fair, when he visited the municipal clerk's office, he saw the clerk there and he was sitting in a high chair. It was a highly distorted kind of a chair, but he was sitting in a high position, which again shows power. And similar to that, here again, a common man is ascending up the stairs where the authority is there. And this authority will, in turn, would find out who the killer is. And it's not up to common people like you or me to find out who the murderer really is if something untoward happened in our lives, right? It's up to the police. And this clearly shows that the stairs and the way in which it is constructed, ഈ ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ സീനിലും ചിയാരസ്ക്യൂറോ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു എഫക്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട്, വേർ ലൈറ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഷാഡോ പ്ലേ എ പ്രോമിനന്റ് റോൾ. ഇവിടെ ഇത്രയും ഷാഡോസ് ആണ്, റൈറ്റ്? ആൻഡ് ഹിയർ യു ഹാവ് എ ക്രെസന്റ് ലൈക്ക് ലൈറ്റ്. And if you see that, this clearly shows that he is climbing up the stairs, and the police, the officers who are the competent authority, who could solve the crime, they occupy a prime position in the society, and they're also placed in a pedestal. It seems like he has to climb all the way up. And when he climbs all the way up, it seems like the steps are getting narrower, right? Valare narrow aayittu thonunundu. Steps ivide vare undu, but still the chiaroscuro effect or the light and shade effects creates such a feeling that the step is leading to nowhere, or as you climb up the stairs, there is not much space, right? ഇവിടെയൊക്കെ ഒരുപാട് സ്പേസ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. So in the beginning it gets easy to climb, for a person to climb up the stairs and to meet the authority. In the beginning stages it's easy, but finally when they have to meet the authority it becomes difficult, അല്ലേ? നിങ്ങളിപ്പോൾ ഒരു ബ്യൂറോക്രാറ്റിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു ഗവൺമെന്റ് ഓഫീസിൽ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാലും you'll be able to meet ordinary people there, orderliesനെ മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും, അവിടെയുള്ള ക്ലർക്സിനെ മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. ബട്ട് വൺസ് യു ഹാവ് ടു മീറ്റ് ദി ഹയർ ഒഫീഷ്യൽസ്, ഈവൻ മിനിസ്റ്റേഴ്സ് ഫോർ ദാറ്റ് മാറ്റർ, if you go to secretariat for that matter, you know that it becomes a bit difficult to reach there, right? And only a few people are allowed to see the people in power. So as you ascend up the stairs, when you climb up the stairs, it becomes narrower, right? And it shows that power and authority and everything, it is not accessible to common people, and they have to strive really hard to reach, to get their voices heard, even if it is a common man like Cesare. Cesare might have been an ordinary person, a middle class person, but still for him to reach the higher authorities, it's not an easy task, and to make them listen to his side of the stories, it's not an easy task. That's what is being shown by these effects. ഈ ഒരു എഫക്റ്റ് അതാണ് ഷോ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. It shows power and it shows bureaucracy, and it shows a power play that exists within the society. Like പോലീസ് എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്നത് നമ്മളെ കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ഫാക്ടറാണ്. ലൈക്ക് ഒരു നോർമൽ സൊസൈറ്റിയുടെ ഫങ്ഷനിങ്ങിന് അത്യാവശ്യമായിട്ട് വേണ്ട ഘടകങ്ങളിലൊന്നാണ് പോലീസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. They have a controlling streak, and they are the ones who maintain law and order, and it's not easy to assess them, and that is clearly depicted in this particular scene. So let's move on. So he quickly climbs up the stairs, and again see the placement here of the police officers. And unlike the clerk, the police officers were seated in an equidistance from each other. See, in this particular frame, so see, unlike our clerk, the police officers are kept equidistant from each other. And when you analyze this frame, they are almost seated in an equal position, like there is no orderlies here. And another thing is that they are also placed in a higher pedestal. There is stool-like contraption on it, and they are placed in a higher pedestal, which shows that they are keen, they are studying some case, and some kind of incident that is happening in the town has taken away their time. It's taken up their time, and they are studying or investigating certain incidents that have happened in the town. Most probably the previous case of that of the death of the clerk. They might be studying it, and they are placed, in an equal position, and they are placed equidistant from each other, and it creates a symmetry, right? So here you can find an order, right? When you go to police station, this is a place where law and order is maintained, and everything is kept in such a way that it shows a symmetry, right? Right from the kind of window-like structure that's here, the lamp-like structure that is here, and it seems like a mirror image, right? And everything is ordered, and it's placed in an orderly manner. If you have something over here, some kind of a projection over here, the same is also over here. And it shows that this is the only place in which you can find some order in this chaos. അപ്പോൾ വളരെ ഭ്രാന്തമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു അറ്റ്മോസ്ഫിയർ ചിത്രീകരിക്കുമ്പോൾ അതിൽ അല്പമെങ്കിലും ഓർഡറിലിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു സ്ഥലമാണ് ഈ പോലീസ് സ്റ്റേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ മൊത്തത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് എടുത്തു നോക്കിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ വളരെ ഭീതി ജനിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഭ്രാന്തമായ ഇമേജസ് ഉള്ളതിൻ്റെ ഇടയിൽ ഇവിടെയാണ് നമുക്ക് അല്പമെങ്കിലും ഒരു ഓർഡർലി മാനറിൽ എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത് നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്. And in this scene again, he comes and he is panting because he has been rushing up to the police. And again, he is placed between the two police officers, and he is recounting the incidents that had happened there, right? He is saying that someone killed his friend, and it is clearly expressionistic. He is so, he is so scared, and he tells them that someone stabbed his friend, and he is recounting the incident that he just saw. And the policeman says to the other that I won't rest until I get to the bottom of this dreadful deed. So the police officers also take this as a challenge upon them. They want to find out who the killer is. Now, see here, our Francis is holding his hands like this, and it's also symbolic, right? He wants to know the truth. So throughout history, or throughout art history, whenever a person is shown holding his fingers like this in this posture, it shows that the person is after truth. Even in a famous painting of Lyceum, a painting which depicts all the Greek philosophers, you can see Plato and Aristotle walking together, and one of them holds their hand up high like this. So they were all searching for truth. And this here, again, in this particular scene, Francis also wishes to know the truth behind the murder of his friend. Another police officer enters the scene, and Francis slowly moves towards the audience, towards the screen, and he is clearly depressed with all those things that have happened over a night's time. And here he is shown slowly descending the stairs. He's slowly coming down the stairs, right? And he's slowly coming down the stairs. And it's not like the way in which he climbed up the stairs. He was frantically climbing up the stairs, running through the stairs. But slowly he climbs down the stairs because he too wants to know who the killer is. And he is clearly depressed with whatever that has happened with his friend Alan. It also shows that he is clearly disturbed by the events that had happened all around him. From this moment on, or from the previous scene itself, we know that Francis has become increasingly involved in this crime, in the sense that he wants to find who the killer is. And another thing is that he has become so depressed, and it has slowly started to affect his mental health, and it is showing from this scene onwards, and even from the previous scene, it becomes clear that it has somehow affected his mental health. And in this particular scene, we can see Jane and Francis together. Remember, Jane was pursued by both Francis as well as Alan, though they were friends, they were in love with the same woman, Jane, and they wanted Jane to choose her suitor. And if Jane chose Francis, then Alan would be happy with it. And if Jane chose Alan, then Francis would be happy with it. So now Francis breaks the news that Alan is no more. He is dead. And that surely affects Jane. See, she is terrified when she hears the news. And here again, her eyes are shown in such a way that it depicts sadness. It depicts the despair, the grief, and when she comes to know that he has been murdered, then that again causes grief in her. And here both characters are depicted as having baggy eyes. They have highlighted their eyes in the same way they have highlighted Caesar's eyes for that matter. In the തുടക്കത്തിലേക്ക് സിസാറിന്റെ eyesനെ നമ്മൾ കണ്ടപ്പോൾ it was highlighted, right? It shows the menace that is there within him. And when you don't sleep for a long time, then that affects you in one way or the other, right? You would develop dark circles around your eyes. Maybe that's the reason why Caesar is shown as having dark circles all around his eyes. And in the same manner, though he's a person who sleeps all the time, still he has dark circles because he has immense fatigue, right? So he has dark circles all over his eyes. And here again, these two characters, that is, are Francis as well as Jane, is shown as having dark circles around their eyes, which shows grief. It denotes the grief that they have when they hear about their best friend's death. Again, the scene shifts and now they reach Jane's apartment. Now, one curious case with Jane's apartment is that it is unlike any other apartment that we saw in this particular movie. See here in Jane's apartment, you cannot see sharp lines as we saw in Alan's apartment. Even in Francis's apartment, we saw sharp lines, but here it is all curved and it is as if it is mild, right? Sharp lines, it's not a good sight for our eyes, right? Whenever we see some sharp object, we feel as if it would pierce our eyes. But when it is contrasted with something which is curvy, it shows that the place is calm and pleasant, right? So when you go on a vacation, you would prefer going to valleys and the like, where you can see all these curved shapes all around you, and it's calming to see these shapes. Similar to that, the entire room or the apartment of Jane is soft and mellow. If you see here, it is decorated with all sorts of clothing, right? Fine, refined clothing, upholsteries and the like. So it is decorated in such a manner that it appears angelic. It seems like angels' wings and the like, right? And it's so calm, and there is even a flower in the middle and even a vase to carry the flower. So it shows that this entire room is so homely and calm, unlike the rooms that we saw in the movie. So far we saw different kinds of rooms and they were all different. They all had a menacing appeal to it. But this particular room is so calming with curved shapes. Even the light that is there in the center is round, and we have flowers over here and we have upholstery. And this person who enters the scene, this is Jane's father, right? And he is a doctor of sorts. And now Francis tells him that he knows that Alan is dead, and he feels that the somnambulist has killed him, because that is his hunch, that is his initial hunch, that the somnambulist in some way or the other killed Alan, because he was the one who predicted that Alan would be dead, right? And in this particular credit that is there, in this particular title that is there, again it is written, I'll obtain police authorization to examine the somnambulist, and this is told by Jane's father. So Jane's father ആണ് ഈ ഒരു particular statement make ചെയ്യുന്നത്. That is, I will obtain police authorization to examine the somnambulist, to question the somnambulist. And again, that shows that our Francis believes that the somnambulist is behind the murder. So Francis strongly believes that the somnambulist is behind Alan's murder. And Jane's father also agrees to help him. Now in the next scene, it's very curious, we are introduced to another character, and it seems like this character is a thief. He is slowly sneaking into a person's home here, right? And it seems like he's not going to do something good. He's up to no good, and he's going to enter that apartment. And the scene slowly fades, and this woman again shouts from over the top of the house, "Murder, help, murder." So this woman shouts that somebody has been murdered. So she saw that this person has murdered someone, and he has a kind of murder weapon in his hand, right? He has a sharp object in his hand, a knife, a sharp knife in his hand. And that is the murder object. So the police clearly has caught him, or even the villagers have caught him. So that scene is also of significance, because this character is introduced to divert the audience's attention. So far, the audience also believe that the somnambulist is behind the murders, because we are forced to believe that there is something sinister about Caligari, right? The person who carries the somnambulist all around, and there is something which is sinister with Cesare too. So as audience, we too are bound to believe that it is none other than Cesare who killed Alan. But we never saw who the murderer was, and now a murderer is introduced right in the middle of the scene, and he carries the murder weapon, which is very similar to the weapon that we saw through the shadows, right? When Alan was being stabbed, we saw the shadow of a murder weapon. It was a sharp knife, and this person was also carrying a sharp knife. So this is a deviation. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ മേർഡർ സ്റ്റോറീസ് ഒക്കെ കാണുമ്പോൾ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ മേർഡർ മൂവീസ് കാണുമ്പോൾ, മേർഡർ മിസ്റ്ററീസ് കാണുമ്പോൾ, often there is always a deviation. A person will be placed in a particular place, and it seems like this person might have committed the murder. This is also an alternative. And nowadays, when such films come up, often people are placed in such a way that the audience do feel that this person is not the murderer. And that is a flaw of the modern day movies that is there, because we even feel that this person will in no way kill, and this person is just a distraction. But this was a trope in those days. And അന്നത്തെ കാലത്ത് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഇതുപോലത്തെ ഒരു ട്രോപ്പ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല, where a deviation is created, right? ഒരു deviation create ചെയ്ത് മറ്റൊരാളായിരിക്കാം murderer എന്ന് തോന്നുന്നത്. The audience too might feel that this person might have killed Alan. So, and it later on became a trope. In almost all movies, there will be a kind of a deviation, another person who's introduced as a murderer. So that murderer is caught, and in the next scene, we see Dr. Caligari, and he is preparing something, like it seems like a broth or a porridge that he has prepared, and he is busy trying to feed it to our Cesare. സിസേറിന് ഫീഡ് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ് ഈ ഒരു ബ്രോത്ത് തയ്യാറാക്കിയിരിക്കുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് ദ വേ ഇൻ വിച്ച് ഹി കീപ്സ് ഹിം, റൈറ്റ്, Cesare mostly sleeps in his coffin like structure, and he feeds him this particular porridge, and he opens his mouth. So if a person is sleeping, how can he eat? Sleepwalking nu kettittunde, sleep eating, is it possible? So this is also questioning the narrative of the movie, right? Sleepwalking is possible, but is sleep eating possible? Adu nadakkumo. And then again, if you see this particular scene, it's very conveniently he closes the lid of the coffin-like structure, and he places Cesare inside it when other people come. And if you observe this particular house in which Dr. Caligari lives, and now when we observe the house of Dr. Caligari from the outside, it seems like this is a very narrow house, right? ഇത് വളരെ narrow ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു house ആയിട്ടാണ് നോക്കുന്നത്, because the exterior appears no more than 6 feet in length. It seems like this exterior is no more than 6 feet in length. But the interior of the home is spacious, and it is a bit wider in size. Now let us take a look at it. So from the outside, it seems like this is pretty narrow, only 6 feet in length from the outside, and then there is this window, right? And this window is also of significance because in this particular window is highly distorted, and it is in a way shown that Caligari views the outside world through this window, through this skewed or highly distorted window. And it shows that Dr. Caligari views the outside world through a distorted lens. ഒരു distorted വേയിലാണ് കാലിഗറി പുറത്തുള്ളവരെ കാണുന്നത് നോക്കാണ്. പറഞ്ഞ ഒരു നോർമൽ വിൻഡോ അല്ല. It seems like a quadrilateral, and it is highly distorted. This particular window is highly distorted. Maybe he glances the whole world through a distorted lens. That's what the director is trying to convey through this particular window. And there is only one window to view the world that is outside, and most probably he never uses it. And it's shown even in this particular scene. In most of the scenes in which Caligari is inside the house, he rarely uses the window to check on people. It shows that his world is narrow, his world is limited. Now in the next scene, Caligari asks them to enter inside his house. At the same time, the murderer who killed the old woman is taken to the police station, right, by the police officers. And they're all happy that they have finally caught the murderer who is behind this crime. So this person now is considered as a serial killer, and finally they have caught the killer in Holston Wall. They're all pointing their fingers at him. They're all accusing him to be a murderer. And he too has a murderous glance in his eyes. And they have found the murder weapon, which is again a very sharp object, right? And they know that Alan was also killed with a sharp object. Same was the case with the clerk. So they have found the murder weapon, and they deduce or they assume that the murderer might have killed Alan too. So this right here is a no-brainer, right? Once you get a murderer, once you get a person red-handed, once you catch a person red-handed when he is doing the act of crime and he has with him the murder weapon, it becomes all the more easier to put charges upon him. Now this person is being framed, and the police officer thinks that all the previous murders were also committed by him, because in all the previous murders too, the same murder weapon was used. So they think that this person might be behind the deaths, the serial murders of Alan as well as the clerk, and now that of the old lady. And now they have caught him red-handed. Meanwhile, our Francis is at Caligari's house, and soon they will be examining Caligari and Cesare. See here. So Jane's father is examining Cesare, and Caligari stands there as if he's guilty. He's not showing any expressions. He's not questioning them. He's just angry that they have come sneaking into his house and they're just examining Cesare, and he's not at all happy about it. And the menacing look is still there in his face. And see the way in which this apartment is placed, right? Let me just pause it for a while. So from the outside, as I said, the apartment seemed much narrow. It was barely 6 feet in width, but here it seems like it's a bit more spacious than that seen on the outside. So the interior appears a bit wider in size. And another thing is that this room itself reveals a whole lot of things about Caligari's personality. See, the house in which he lives, it's quite narrow. It's just a one-room house. How can a person live in a one-room house, right? It's too small in size, and he just has a single room. And the interior space consists of painted lines as well as harsh lighting from the lamp. So you have lines all around in this space, right? You have lines all around, and these are all painted lines to create the chiaroscuro effect. And you have a bright light placed somewhat in the center of the room. And the light creates shadows, and it matches with the patterns that is there on the floor as well as walls. And it creates sharp angles, right? You can see there are sharp angles everywhere in this room. and it creates a kind of a menacing effect. And on the whole, this place is claustrophobic in the sense that this is a very closed space. ഇപ്പോൾ ക്ലോസ്ഡ് സ്പേസസിനെയൊക്കെ പേടിയുള്ളവരുണ്ടായിരിക്കും. അങ്ങനെയുള്ളവരെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ക്ലോസ്ട്രോഫോബിക് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. വളരെ ക്ലോസ്ഡ്, എൻക്ലോസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സ്പേസസ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു റൂമിൽ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് ഇരിക്കാൻ പേടിയുള്ളവര്, അടച്ചിട്ട മുറിയിൽ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് ഇരിക്കാൻ പേടിയുള്ളവര്, അതിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ക്ലോസ്ട്രോഫോബിയ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഫിയർ ഓഫ് ക്ലോസ്ഡ് സ്പേസസ്. ആൻഡ് ഓപ്പോസിറ്റ് ആണ് അഗോറോഫോബിയ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, ഫിയർ ഓഫ് ഓപ്പൺ സ്പേസസ് ആൻഡ് ക്രൗഡ്സ്. And in this particular scene, the entire place is claustrophobic. It is a very narrow house, a one-room house, and it has all the angles placed in a very distorted manner. There is a light which is glaring, and it creates shadows on the walls as well as on the floor, and it is quite menacing, and it is a claustrophobic setting. That is, when three people are there, it seems like they have to pause for breath. അത്രയ്ക്ക് ശ്വാസം എടുക്കാൻ പോലും സ്ഥലമില്ലാത്ത അത്ര കൺജസ്റ്റഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സ്പേസ് ആണ്, വിച്ച് ഗിവ്സ് ക്ലോസ്ട്രോഫോബിയ, റൈറ്റ്? സോ ദാറ്റ് ഓൾസോ ഷോസ് ദാറ്റ് കാലിഗറി ഈസ് menacing. He has a menacing nature and he is disturbed. But another curious factor that you need to take note, now that you have seen the movie, is that later on in the movie it is revealed that it is not Caligari who has killed any of these characters, or it is not Caligari who is been controlling Caesar and committing the murders. It was rather all an imagination that cropped up in the mind of ഫ്രാൻസിസ്. നമുക്ക് പിന്നീട് മനസ്സിലാവും ഫ്രാൻസിസിന്റെ ഇമാജിനേഷന് തോന്നിയതാണ് ഇതെല്ലാം. കാലിഗറി വാസ് an ordinary man. He was just a doctor in an asylum എന്ന് നമുക്ക് പിന്നീട് മനസ്സിലാവും. So again, see the way in which Francis looks at Caligari, and maybe he is the one who is concocting this image of a very cruel, menacing character named Caligari, and in his mind he might have thought that Caligari lives in such worse conditions. ചിലപ്പോൾ ഇതെല്ലാം ഫ്രാൻസിസിന്റെ മൈൻഡിൽ തന്നെ ഉണ്ടാവുന്നതാണ്. ബിക്കോസ് ഈ എൻറ്റയർ സ്റ്റോറി ഫ്രാൻസിസ് കുക്ക് ചെയ്തതാണ് എന്ന് നമുക്ക് പിന്നീട് മനസ്സിലാവും. കുക്കപ്പ് ചെയ്തൊരു സ്റ്റോറിയാണെന്ന്. സോ ഇൻ ഹിസ് മൈൻഡ് ഹി തിങ്സ് ദാറ്റ് ദിസ് ഇസ് ദി അബോർഡ് ഓഫ് കാലിഗറി. കാലിഗറിയുടെ പ്ലേസ് ഇതാണ്. ദിസ് ഇസ് ദി abode of Caligari. This is the place of residence of Caligari, which is highly claustrophobic. So an ordinary person might feel that this place is congested, and a normal person would not live in such a congested place. And Caligari lives there because he is mad, and that is what Francis thinks. Francis is thinking that Caligari is a mad psychiatrist, an asylum director, right? So in his mind, he feels that this is the place where Caligari should stay, where everything is distorted, where he views the outside world through a distorted window, where the entire space is congested so that open thoughts are not permissible. ഇവിടെ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് വളരെ നാരോ ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു സ്പേസ് ആണ്. So he is only made to think in a very narrow manner. So that is there. And I told about the window in the previous scene. Again, see that the window in itself is distorted in shape, and it has a deformed frame. അതൊരു വളരെ നല്ല വെൽ കൺസ്ട്രക്റ്റഡ് വിൻഡോസ് അല്ല. നമ്മുടെയൊക്കെ വീട്ടിലാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു റെക്ടാങ്കുലർ ഷേപ്പിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സ്ക്വയർ ഷേപ്പിലേക്ക് ഒരു വിൻഡോസ് ആണ് വരുന്നത്. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ചില വീടുകളിലൊക്കെ ഇപ്പോൾ സർക്കിൾ ഷേപ്പിലൊക്കെ വിൻഡോസ് ഒക്കെ വെക്കാറുണ്ട്, കുറച്ച് മോഡേൺ ആയിരിക്കട്ടെ എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ച്. ബട്ട് ഹിയർ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് നോട്ട് ലൈക്ക് ദാറ്റ്. ദ ഫ്രെയിം ഇൻ ഇറ്റ് സെൽഫ് ഇസ് ഡിസ്റ്റോർട്ടഡ്, ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് deformed, and it shows that Caligari's point of view of the outside world is also deformed and distorted. Let me just show you the window once again. See, the window here is deformed and distorted, and he views the outside world only through the single window, and since it is distorted, it shows that his mind too might be deformed and distorted. When I say all these details, do take it down, because it is important from an examination point of view. They might be asking the question of how this movie is an example of expressionism, and all these elements do constitute expressionism, right? ഈ distorted images, figures, ഇതെല്ലാം expressionism തന്നെയാണ്. They are using the mise-en-scène, they are using the props that are available on screen or on the studio to create a menacing effect. And it's highly subjective. We feel that, or even the character Francis feels that since Caligari views the outside world through a distorted, deformed window, he might be having a deformed or distorted view of the world. വേൾഡ് വ്യൂ, നമുക്ക് ലോകത്തിനെ പറ്റിയിട്ടുള്ള നമ്മുടെ പൊതുവിലുള്ള ഒരു ധാരണയുണ്ട്, അത് വളരെ ഡിസ്റ്റോർട്ടഡും ഡിഫോംഡും ആയിരിക്കാമെന്ന് ഫ്രാൻസിസ് വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. ബിക്കോസ് Caligari is staying in such a place, Caligari might have such distorted and deformed view of the world. Now, Jane's father asks Caligari to wake Cesare up, and he does not do that. He just stares at him because he does not want to wake him up. And he says that he cannot wake him up. It is up to him to wake up. So, Caligari പറയുന്നതെന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ Caligari cannot wake him up. It is up to Cesare to wake up. That is the thing that he says. That is a strong alibi, right? ഇപ്പോൾ ഒരാളെ ഉറങ്ങിക്കിടക്കുന്ന ഒരാളെ എനിക്ക് വിളിച്ചുണർത്താൻ പറ്റില്ല. He might himself think that he should wake up എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. So that's a strong alibi. That's what he is doing also. He says that he cannot waking up because he is a person who sleeps all day long. So he himself, that is Cesare himself, must wake up. Only then they can meet him. And then when Francis moves away from that house or just go outside, because he know that this is not going to lead them any place, because ultimately Caligari is not cooperating with them, right? Caligari ഇവരുടെ ഇൻവെസ്റ്റിഗേഷനുമായിട്ട് കോപ്പറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാത്തത് കൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഒരിക്കലും ഇവർക്ക് ഇയാളിൽ നിന്ന് ട്രൂത്ത് കിട്ടില്ല എന്നറിഞ്ഞതുകൊണ്ട് Cesare comes out of the house, and at that time he receives a letter and he reads that letter. And what is it? So it is just a newspaper report. It's extra, right? So it's not just a letter, it's a newspaper report, and it's an extra news. It's a news for the day. നമ്മൾ ചൂടുള്ള വാർത്ത എന്ന് പറയില്ലേ, അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു ഈവനിങ്ങിൽ അറിഞ്ഞ ന്യൂസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അന്ന് മോർണിംഗിൽ നടന്ന ന്യൂസ്, അതാണ് അവിടെ പറയുന്നത്. And what is it? The Holsten Wall mystery has been solved. So the place, the town in which they lived, that was known as Holsten Wall, right? ഇപ്പോൾ ഇവർ താമസിക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലത്തിന്റെ പേരാണ് Holsten Wall. And this Holsten Wall mystery has been solved. The multiple murders that took place has been solved. And who were the previous victims? The previous victims were the town clerk as well as our Alan. And then a woman was also killed, and now the killer has been caught. And then the newspaper report reads, 2-time murderer caught in 3rd attempt. So 2 times he murdered someone, but the 3rd was an attempt. So the woman was not killed. Maybe this was the woman who called out the name, right? So the 2-time murderer caught in 3rd attempt. So he was red-handedly caught in his 3rd attempt to kill a woman, an old woman. Now once they hear the news, they are again bewildered, because so far they believed that Caligari as well as Cesare might be the persons behind this murder. But now that they know that the police has already caught the murderer, so they don't have much things to do here. And Caligari is happy to hear this news, because now nobody would come around his house, snooping around his house, and nobody would come around and investigate more upon the somnambulist Cesare, and he is happy about it. And the door closes behind him. Now, the way in which he smiles is also menacing, because now he has just escaped the charges of being labeled as a murderer. So he has just escaped the charges. So more murders are yet to come. So that is the end of Act 3.